We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This is Cheryl from Jajawarong country. G'day Shelley. Matildas cap number 95, and we tried to catch up with you for episode 95, but we get an opportunity to chat to you now, which is absolutely terrific. So thank you, number one, for being part of the podcast. It must be an exciting era for you to remember the efforts that you put into the game and to see where it is now. Maybe just a simple question to start off with, but what was the best thing about playing in your era?
Yeah, it was funny. I wasn't one of the beginners, and I'm not one of the players now. So I'm sort of in the middle there. So I think it was a little bit easier for me than what it was for the girls that first started off. I did go to the Institute of Sport, and I did get paid to play, even though it was very minimal. When you were down there, we did get some money to help us with accommodation and those sort of things, obviously going down to live in the ACT, but never enough to live off or to make a career of. But that was that era, I guess, and for me, I enjoyed every minute of it. Like I would train every day. If somebody said, you've got to go and train every day, I'd do it. I just loved the game, and I loved playing, and if I was getting paid or not, so be it. That was my time, and I really enjoyed it.
So one of our best friends of the podcast, Sarah Groob, is someone that we reach out to quite often to say, hey, Groobs, do you remember, because Groobs was a team manager of the Matildas back in a particular era, and I say, tell us what you remember about cap number blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now, I don't know, we've already recorded it on the last podcast, but I do remember she said that your center of gravity was really low, so you're really strong on the ball. She said your leadership together with, you're a leader on and off the field, and together with Alison Foreman as well, the two of you were really quite the heart of the Matildas at the time as well. I'm just trying to think what else she talked about in there, but Groups is someone who, she shares her experiences really well, and she puts in a good word for players, but she was really quite complimentary of your efforts there. And I think as much as you say it was easier for you, one of the things which she did talk about was that you went into the AIS together with your family, which must have been, when we look at the parenting policies that we have now, back in the era that you were doing it, it was probably a little bit tougher, but hopefully everyone came out of it unscathed and had just as much fun as you did.
Yeah, well, that was probably my biggest barrier, to be honest, having the kids. And it wasn't so much as my husband moving down there and getting a new job. He worked in IT, and you can get a job anywhere in IT, especially in Canberra. But for me, the kids and juggling babysitting was massive. And really, it was, your kids weren't welcome at training. Like it was I remember taking, and I won't say what particular coach it was, but I had no option. My husband, for some reason, had a meeting, and he could often work from home. So it was very rarely happened. And I had my two youngest there, and I said, look, you kids have to sit there. And they were 13 months apart. So you can imagine what that would have been like, 2 and 3. And they were probably a little bit noisy, and I probably wasn't concentrating as much. But yeah, I remember the coach at the time saying, don't bring your kids. Pretty much don't bring them again. Kids, this is not a place for kids. And yeah, I get that, but somebody could have stepped in and helped me look after them. There were people on the sideline, so yeah, for me, that upset me. And, I didn't ever miss training for any reason, so that was our biggest challenge for me and my husband, is to make sure that we could get someone to mind the kids when they were training on, and if he had a meeting or I had training. So I felt quite isolated in that area. I was sort of the only one that had kids. Well, I was the only one that had kids, but there was no support for me as a mother at all.
Yeah, so times have changed, because we can see Katrina Gorry is there with her little bub, and I think Tamika Yallop as well. She's got a bub, and obviously we saw quite visibly when Melissa Barbieri maybe not when she was in Matilda's time frame, but when she was in W League and A League women, she's made it part of the journey. And I think you were part of that journey to start setting it up for them as well. So hopefully the contributions that you made have made it a bit easier for the mothers participating as well. It takes a village, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the thing about being a mum, people get, once in my day, people would say, well, what is she still? She's a mum. Why is she still playing? It's like, I think you're tougher after you've had a couple of kids, to be honest. Like you go through a lot when you've got kids, but it also, it gives you something else. So, when you're going into the Matildas, it's often all you think about is football, 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 football. But when you have something else that you've got to look after as well, it sort of takes you away from football and then you're fresh to go back in. So I really think it is an asset to girls that go in, women that go in and play and have children.
Yep. Yeah, you definitely can't be what you can't see as well. So again, it points all the way back to you, I think, to say that, you can.
I was very young. I was very young when I had my kids. I was 21, when I had my first child. So, that doesn't happen these days, but still people are playing longer. They've been looked after longer. And so their careers span more years than what they would have in our day. So, that's
very true. I'm going to go backwards and forwards in time, I suppose. But in terms of the game today, is there something that you would call out about the game today that you love?
Oh, look, I guess I love that the girls are getting some recognition. They can make a career out of it now and get paid to do so. I think that's awesome. I know there might be a few people that look back and, that's not fair. We didn't get paid, but I don't feel that at all. It's like any sport; it progresses and it changes, and it's not just women's football; it's all women's sport. It's amazing to watch and see it be publicised and see it in the media, and I think that's pretty special.
I agree. I think all of the eras are great. As a fan, we get to see the change in the game as well. And the more professional it gets, it almost seems like you're at risk of getting further away from the players in the game. And I think that's a big part of if we think about the Matildas, it's a big part of who the Matildas are, that they are still reachable and approachable. And if it gets too far down the trajectory of being more and more professional, that's at risk. But anyway, who had the greatest influence on your game?
So are you talking as a player aspect or anybody in particular?
Any which way you want. If there's a different answer, I mean, was it a particular coach for you? Was it a parent that drove you around nonstop? Was it,
I was just about to say, like, my mum was fabulous. I grew up in a pretty much a dysfunctional sort of a family. My dad was a pretty bad alcoholic and an aggressive alcoholic at that. And so my mum would get me to training or get me to soccer when she could, but there were times she couldn't. We only had one car. We didn't have a lot of money. And there was a man that used to do a lot around the football club that I started with, and we were called Charlestown Hotspurs back then. But he looked after me, and I didn't recognise it probably at the time. But he would get me to games. He would get me to training. He was like a mentor to me that I didn't realise because I was only quite young. And that was probably from the age of maybe 12 to 14 that he was sort of in my life, and he passed away. But he was one. And then I had a really good young team. I started playing when I was 10 back then. The boys wouldn't have us before that. But and there was a few Matildas in that team that I started with too, and that Lisa Dunn, Deborah Carlin, Bonshaw. So we had some quite good players come out of that team. But this was a father that just gave everything to the girls, and they're probably the people I do remember when I was younger and had those struggles, I guess.
Yeah, and on the field, who was the person that influenced your game on the field, whether or not it was a player in your team or a player in another team that influenced you as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of look back at players and think, who did I look up to? I got on with a lot of players and I had a lot of respect for a lot of players. I don't know if anyone sort of shaped my game in that way, but I always love to see the kids playing, and I don't know whether it's because I was, like especially when I was in the Matildas, and I was one of the older players, and same when I played, for Northern New South Wales. But so I was sort of a leader around the team. I just loved seeing the kids progress, and I loved watching kids that had speed. Always, they always inspired me. I love watching kids with speed and learning the game and all of that sort of thing. But I can't really pick out someone in particular. There was quite, especially when we were down at the Institute together. I mean, we lived and breathed football.
Yeah.
So there was quite a few players around me, Sarah Cooper, Lisa Casagrande, Julie Murray. Like, we were all good mates, and we worked well together, and we pretty much helped each other through things.
Yeah. That sounds great. So given that your Matilda's career kind of kicked off a little bit later than some of the players, and I think Groob said it was you were in your late 20s, and if I go by Wikipedia, I think it said 28. It probably allowed you to become a person first, and some of the players that we see out there are probably, they're footballers first, and then they forget that they need to be people as well. I'm sorry, George. That's George just having a little bit of a bark. So the question I was going to ask is, what does being a Matilda mean to you now in your life and career, given that, you were already a person, a parent, a wife, all those kind of things? How did it blend into your life?
Well, I think that the reason I represented when I was younger, but then when I hit 18, I thought, well, I'm going to have to pay for this myself now. So that's why I drifted out, and I didn't play when I was young. And then I got married and had 3 kids. And then when it became Olympic sport, I thought, hang on a bit, like I can get in here, and, I won't have to pay my way. And I was probably more grounded at that age as well.
Yep.
So yeah, that's why I started late. But yeah, I think maybe I was a lot more settled, and it just gave me a better perspective of the game and where I wanted to be. In saying that, there's you can have some really challenging times. I know a lot of people will sit back and say, well, you're pretty lucky you play for your country. But one of the biggest challenges, I think, in that era was there was not a lot of support for your mental health.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of players go through some pretty tough times, and it was like, suck it up. Like there was nothing to sort of support people. And there's been players that I still keep in contact with now. I keep in contact with quite a few people. But, I was talking to her one day, and she said, look, if I had the choice again, I would never have gone down to the Institute. And I said, why is that? She said, I hated it. She said, it ruined my life. I wish I didn't go down. I was sort of made to go down, and she had a lot of struggles down there, just moving and being on her own, and she's only a young girl. So I look at that and I feel sad for that type of thought. I guess I've got through, I missed out on teams as well, and you go through all those hardships as well as the high times. But for me, it's taking away outside of sport that I think is really important, and it's become good for me. Like I learn a lot, and it wasn't just playing football on the park. It's about relationships, it's about leadership, it's about management, and it sort of set me up for my career, really. I worked in sport when I first finished playing, and thought, well, I'll go back to uni. I went to uni, and I was 32 then, so I went to uni and studied and worked in sport most of my life. I worked for the Australian Sports Commission and Sport and Rec, and went into rugby and those sort of sports. And then I got out of that and thought, well, what am I going to do now? I want to change, and the NDIS had just rolled out, and I thought, right, I'm going to go and work in that field. End up getting in there and seeing a lot of gaps, and thought, right, I'm getting out there. And my business partner and I started our own business. So when you look at the groundings you get from sport and the learnings you get from sport, that you can certainly take them out and put them into other things. And I think it's just, especially the teamwork, when you work in a team environment in any way, you've got to get on with people. You've got to understand people are different, that they're better at some things than they are at other things. And you sort of learn that in football as well.
Yeah. And those high performance environments, regardless of whether or not it was football or hockey or swimming, a lot of them are coming under pressure at the moment for not being the safest of places to have particularly vulnerable younger people. I mean, I'd like to think if I use my own experience, if I was maybe 28 going in there, I'd be feeling a lot stronger and safer than if I was 16. And I'm not saying I would be strong or perfect by any stretch, but geez, if I was 16 in that environment and not having support versus being a little bit older and knowing what was okay and what wasn't okay. So I think with the current coach of the Matildas as well, Tony Gustafsson, one of the things that I hear from him, and I've chatted to him a couple of times, but his focus on the whole person, not even considering them as a player first, but considering them as a person first, I think is a good mindset to have. And hopefully it flows through in not just something that they say, but something that they do throughout. All right. Next question. 2023 is a big year for women's football. We've got the World Cup coming to Australia and New Zealand. Where are you going to be? How involved are you with the game at the moment? And will you be turning up to the games with your mates, your ex-Matilda mates?
Yeah, definitely. Look, I'm not too involved at all. I'll watch a game here and there. I'll definitely always watch Matildas. So. But generally on the screen, unless it's local or in Sydney or I can get to it. I do travel a lot with work, so sometimes that pulls me up. But yeah, look, I'm not going to miss games. I've talked about it. I'm friends in Newcastle with Renee Iseriff and Trey McGovern and a few other Joey and Cheryl Salisbury. So we're all up here. We caught up the other night actually to watch the game. But yeah, we talked about going to the games and stuff. We're not put anything in cement yet. You know, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure I'll certainly be there cheering them along.
Very good. And hopefully you'll be recognised as an ambassador of the game as well. I think the recognition from, I'm not pointing fingers at Football Australia, but making sure that the Matildas who've contributed to where they are today get the recognition, because I think it's important. You know, many people would be able to name Sam Kerr and Steph Catley and Caitlin Ford, those kind of people, but there was a lot before them, and it continues to be a beautiful game. I've got a couple more questions if it's okay. One of them was just around something that's really quite different, and I know that I think Melissa Barbieri, although maybe I'm making it up, maybe it was Joey Peters, talked about playing in North Korea. Now you were in the squad when you played in North Korea. Is there anything that stands out to you of the environment when you were playing there? Is there any memories that you share?
I take that trip away as one of my as my favorite trip. If anyone asks me, when you travel with football, what's the most memorable place you went to? And it's North Korea. And that being that nobody goes to North Korea. And the environment there when we were there is, it was just extraordinary. So for me, my favorite trip, I'll never go back. So, but I come away from that thinking, wow, this is so different. And I think I was a bit naive going into it. I think if I'd done my research, I probably would have been a little bit scared, but I wasn't. I really had faith in the coach and the players around me that we were going to be safe. I don't think they got much older when you're in their country. But anyway, I felt quite safe. So I know the government at the time were telling us not to go. So that was
okay.
Yeah, there was a lot of media around it. One of the times we did get a fair bit of recognition, but it wasn't on the game or anything like that. It was more around, why are you going?
Yeah.
So, and we'd been told not to go by the government.
Yeah,
so that was my recollection. Yeah, and I did a media interview. I remember doing one for that particular tour, but it was just bizarre. I mean, you go in there and they obviously have been told that they've won the war, and we had a young girl that was chaperone, and she would tell us, all these things, that they were the best country in the world, all the things that she'd been told.
Wow.
They never get anything outside of North Korea. They get no media or, so it's quite sad for them, but, they believe everything they're told. And if they don't, they're in big trouble. So just to see, that no cars on the road, obviously very poor, very minimal food. It was pretty sad, I think, but, the stadiums were full. All those people would have been made to come. So it was quite an eye-opener. We weren't allowed out of the motel without chaperones and things like that.
Yeah.
I think the night before the game, there's a brass band playing down under our window, and just all of those bizarre things. And your phones were monitored when we rung. I remember ringing home and talking about some of these things to my husband, and the phone went dead. And it happened to quite a few of the girls. So there was some real bizarre things that happened while we were there.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those stories. I know that I've had a conversation to one of the referees, one of the FIFA referees, who's a mate of mine, and we talked about the referees as part of AFC and from North Korea as well, and the experiences they have, and it is a challenge. And I wish the individuals of North Korea, I wish them all the best.
Oh, yeah, lovely people. Just a sad environment, I guess. And, yeah.
Alrighty, this is where you get to tell, not tell on people, but talk about other players. 1995 and 1996 was an era where we saw probably quite a number of new Matildas debuting around then. The upcoming caps that we've got, I don't know if you've got any thoughts. Bryony Deuce, I'm not sure if I said her surname correctly.
Bryony,
Kelly Golubiowski.
Yep.
And Belinda Kitching.
Yep.
Talk about those names for me for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, Kel I liked Kel. She was a great little player, and she debuted pretty much when I did. So she might have gone on the next game or the game after or something like that. But so she sort of started with me, and she was probably 16 and I was probably 10 years older than her, or more, 11 to 12 years older than her. But she was a great kid and fantastic player, had the ball tied to her feet. I think she sort of was great with the ball, and just very skillful and quick. And I really like watching Kel play. She was awesome, and to play with, you could shoot a ball in front of her, and you know she'd pick it up pretty quickly. So definitely a great player.
Sounds like a good teammate to have out there.
Yeah, a little bit like if you look at Lisa Devanna, probably not as what would you call it? What I'm trying to describe Lise, but Lisa's a fantastic, or still is a fantastic player, but she probably wasn't as like a little bull terrier dog at a ball like Lise, but she was fairly similar. With a pace and the way she played, I thought. Yeah.
Pretty determined. Yeah. Okay.
Pretty determined, yeah. One of the things that I reckon that with the changes now, with the girls now, is the pressures they've got with social media. And that's one of the things that I'm glad I didn't have to deal with. So, they've got the fame, they've got the media, they're getting the money now, but geez, I'd hate to, you wouldn't want to read social media. So that's one of the things that I think is, it's very challenging for the girls in this era.
Yeah, I think it's a really good call out, and probably to a degree, it's a really important thing for teenagers or even adults, everyone, that you know what people are doing on it, how much time you're doing things on it, those kind of things.
Guess what you say, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say it. I mean, it is a platform where people can hide, and I guess that's what you get. But
say a bit of rubbish and
but you can't do anything these days, can you? So unless someone gets a photo and posts it on social media. So I do feel for the girls in that aspect.
Well, thank you very much.